Yo, it's JSF, and by now we all know the NRS formula, right? We know the release schedule. Every 2 years they release a new game. 2011 was Mortal Kombat, 2013 Injustice, 2015 is Mortal Kombat, 2017 Injustice, 2019 back to Mortal Kombat. So you would think, hey, next year we should get an Injustice 3, right? But we still have no announcement, right? And everything was seeming like it was still on pace, still on schedule, even up to Aftermath dropping, right? At first, we were worried, like, hey, is the pandemic gonna affect things? Aftermath drops, it seems like, the final expansion of the game. Okay, cool. Everything seems normal. And then we make it all the way to December now, and we still have no announcement of an Injustice 3. So what's going on? Did it get canceled? Are we getting an Injustice 3? Is it delayed? Have they just forgotten about the franchise? Well, the funny thing is, it's not as far behind as it seems, because Mortal Kombat 9 or Mortal Kombat 11, I'm sorry, was announced in December 2018, at the Game Awards. But the thing about that is the Game Awards was 2 weeks ago. It's December 24th as I'm recording this, so Merry Christmas Eve if you celebrate that. The Game Awards was December 10th, 2 weeks ago, and there was no announcement from NetherRealm, even though they did win an award. But the good news is Injustice 3 is happening. How do we know Injustice 3 is happening? Well, we don't have any proof, right? We don't have an announcement from NetherRealm. They haven't been teasing a new game. There haven't been any leaks that prove it. There have been some leaks, but there haven't been any real leaks. They've been pretty much all fake. So how do we know Injustice 3 is going to happen? Well, we can look at the clues that we can pick up from what NetherRealm has done, what they've said, and just, you use our own deductive reasoning to try to figure this out. So, one thing I want to point out, like I said, the formula, every 2 years a new game comes out. And then if you remember a couple of months ago, they had the DC Fandom event. They actually had a panel for Injustice. And it had Ed Boon on it. It had Jim Lee. It had a few people on it, right? And one of the things that they were talking about was the Injustice franchise and the huge successes of it. But you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take my word for it. You can listen to Ed Boon himself.
We really saw an opportunity to do something strong with mobile. What I love about the mobile game with the comic is they're both kind of like, they were spawned from the game, but they just became their own forces by themselves. And, like comparable forces, the mobile game, both mobile games made over $200 million. That's like movie level, income. And it's like, so that along with the comic, which, I don't know how many people remember that comic book owned the comic book digital charts. Like, I would see like 8 of the top 10 were Injustice.
So yeah, basically they've made a ridiculous amount of money. He said each Injustice mobile game made over $200 million. And then the console games were extremely successful as well. The comic was successful. The entire Injustice universe became a huge thing. Not only just bigger than the console games, but just like a huge part of DC Comics. So it's super successful, and if you know anything about business, anything that's super successful is going to be repeated or it'll have a sequel. Basically, they won't give up on something that's winning. Now, if it's something that's completely run its course and there's nothing else to do, that's a little different. But I mean, even in the Injustice 2 ending, it's left pretty much on a cliffhanger, right? And there are 2 separate endings, right? So they definitely have shown some intention to pick up where they left off. But here's the thing. If it is coming, right, why wouldn't they make it? Like, if it sounds like they have all the incentive in the world, they were talking about it a couple months ago, they're gonna make the game. What's taking so long, right? What happened? What's throwing it off track? Because like I said, with Aftermath, it seemed like everything was right on pace, and now it seems like it's definitely not. So what's happened, right? We can just look at what's going on in the world, for one, with the entire pandemic, right? A lot of people have had their work schedules, their jobs affected, and even NetherRealm specifically, right? If you watch all the combat casts from this year, or at least it's Aftermath, and even for Ultimate, they're all still at home. So if they're not going in the office to do the work, the pace might be a little different. The results might be a little different, right? So they've definitely been affected. I mean, I guess they never publicly said how, or we never really knew how bad the pandemic affected NetherRealm. I mean, we still got some new characters and whatnot, but to think it didn't affect the timeline of anything, kind of like I don't believe that, you know. Or maybe they just made a conscious decision to say, hey, let's pull back a bit. Not to mention MK11 was extremely successful. This game sold over 8 million copies. You know, the reviews were really good apparently, even though I think the game is super trash. It sold really, really well, and it allowed them to do more for it because it was so successful, right? So with the Injustice stuff possibly being behind schedule, and if you remember back to Injustice 2 before that game came out, that game was behind schedule as well. There was like a 4-month drought at the end of 2016 where we got no new information about Injustice 2, and then the game ended up releasing a month later. Like, Injustice 2 is the only NRS game to release in May and not April. It released like a full month after, around the time every other game is released. So it being behind schedule is not like far-fetched, you know what I mean? And if you look at it, it seems like Aftermath was the original planned ending for the game. Because if you look at Ultimate, right? Well, after Aftermath, NetherRealm kind of went dark. They put out Aftermath story expansion, obviously a few new characters, a balance patch, added armor breakers, all this stuff, and they kind of went dark after that. They weren't really talking about anything for a few months, and it seemed like that was the end. And then Ed Boon popped out teasing stuff, right? And I think they made a conscious decision there to just push Injustice back a little bit further and say, hey, we're doing really good with Mortal Kombat. Let's throw out one last piece of Mortal Kombat content, throw out a little bit more to hold the fans over and, you know, open the floodgates. And that's why they let Custom Variations rock, because they're like, you know what, let's just give the people what they want. The game has lived its life. It's already done its successful run. Let's just throw a little bit more for the fans, for the people who just want to have fun. So they gave us Rain, they gave us Mileena, who were huge fan favorites, who they know we all wanted. They literally said in the game. They gave us Rambo, another 80s iconic movie star, guest character that people love. Gave us all of that, gave us Custom Variations and competitive, said, hey, go crazy. And there's evidence of this in the fact that when the Combat Pack 2 released, every single character was bugged. Like, they all had ridiculous bugs. Rain, Rambo, and Mileena. They all had ridiculous bugs. They seem very rushed. If you look at Mileena's move list in the game, Mileena doesn't have any, like, you know, the tournament variations aren't the tournament standard anymore, but they still exist. All of Mileena's moves are inner tournament variations. She doesn't have any moves that are outside of tournament variations. And I believe two of her ability moves are literally just the same move in the air. Like, it doesn't look like they put a shit ton of time, like as much time into these characters as they did all the other characters, you know? They have some very derivative animations and stuff like that, and this is not to say that the characters are bad. I enjoy all the characters, but it's kind of just another nod to say, hey, maybe the original plan got knocked off to the side and they said, oh, well, let's get some characters out real quick and add a little more content before we get to Injustice 3. So with all that considered, I think it's pretty secure and safe to believe, hey, Injustice 3 is happening. It's just a little behind schedule. I would say give it another month or 2 months. I'd say by like mid-February-ish is when I would expect an announcement. Unless anything is lining up with something, right? Like HBO Max is going to release the Snyder Cut of Justice League. And I know people were thinking, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with Injustice rolling out. And you're right, but you got to remember that they are all Warner Brothers at the end of the day. And even Ed Boon said it in that same DC Fandom interview.
Joker had this movie coming up, which was, you know, an R-rated movie. And so we thought that there was an opportunity to even consider putting him in Mortal Kombat.
He referenced the fact that Joker was coming out with that DC was coming out with an R-rated Joker movie, and it was a darker, different take on the character, and that's kind of how they came up with putting Joker in Mortal Kombat. Because originally they had no plans of putting DC characters in Mortal Kombat. But once they saw that opportunity, they were like, hey, this would be a good chance for that. So maybe they got something lined up with the Snyder Cut releasing. Who knows? But I believe it's very, very safe to assume Injustice 3 is happening. But what do y'all think, man? Does this not prove it in your heads? Do you think they just forgot about the franchise? Do you think they're just going to quit while they're ahead? They don't want to make any more money. Let me know. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here, man. You guys enjoy the holidays if I don't see you tomorrow. Y'all have a good one. Stay safe. JSF, I'm out. Peace.